my vision for Hope of the Poor is that we would take Christ into the darkest mission fields. I want to be in the places where nobody's willing to go, or other people are just not successful if they do go there. And so I want to take the gospel there. But what we want to do is we want to go there and encounter Christ in these people, and bring Christ to these people. So in Mexico City, we work at the city dump. There's 1,000 people who live and work there, or work there. I work with street kids, and I also work in a homeless shelter for elderly homeless women. And what we want to do is we want to go there and encounter Christ, because Christ is present in the poor.
As soon as you get off the bus, all you can see is just a desolate wasteland.
And it looked like the hill country, but the hills were trash. And I remember seeing what I thought were birds, but it was trash flying in the air.
And as you walk through it, the smell hits you, and there are flies everywhere, and the ground is covered in some kind of sludge, which is runoff from the trash when it rains. There are wild dogs everywhere.
And we tried to make as many pews and seating areas as possible. And you could tell just how exhausted these people were, because as they were coming in for Mass, they were actually choosing to, instead of sit where we had just put up these pews, they were choosing to try to sit in the corners, in the shade. They chose to sit next to this truck that was kind of blocking the sun. The thing that's different about this is these people were almost timid to come to the sacraments. You could tell that they just weren't used to having people look at them as if they're another human person. And to bring them the sacraments and Mass was something that, for me, was just incredibly moving.
Vida, sí, duro, claro, pero el cielo es nuestra casa, con Dios, con nosotros, eternamente, hermanos, hermanas.
We brought a giant load of chicken and tortillas into the dump with us to make lunch for them. So we just stood there, grabbing handfuls of chicken and slapping them into tortillas, and they're just regular old people. You're like, hey, you want a taco? And they're like, yeah, you just hang out and eat with them. We ate the same food that they ate. We just had lunch with them like you would with friends.
And so we just kind of started walking into their turf, just literally mountains of trash. And so we were just walking through those, and your feet would it was very spongy, so your feet would depress in, and you would sink into the trash at times. But we got to meet a lot of people, just beautiful people. And so we just invited them to the sacraments, to that source of love. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
The most important thing I realized is to just listen to them. Going into a mission trip, I'd always had this idea of a mission trip being you go in there and you tell and you preach Christ to the world, but the best way I found to be Christ to these people when you don't speak the language is just listen to them, because these people don't really have anyone to listen to them in this kind of situation.
She was telling us about how she lived in the hole in the ground with a dozen other kids. The police thought they were vermin, they didn't think they were worth living, and They set the like little hole on fire with them still inside, and that it was like a miracle that they survived.
Climbing down into the hole was pretty dangerous. There wasn't really a ladder. It was just some like crags in the side of the tunnel and a couple of like jagged pieces of metal that were sticking out of the wall that you could grab onto. When you got down to the bottom, there wasn't really a place to stand because the ceiling was really low, and then also the floor was covered in trash and dirty water. There was just a tiny concrete platform that you could sort of stand on that we huddled on.
But still, how she was able to come out of that place in her life, and how she was able to literally come out of that hole and live her life in the way that she's doing now. Like, that was just really inspiring for me.
You know, we were on a pretty busy street, but then you turn right off, and there's a little kind of like shoulder above one of the main highways. And so right next to that, there's this camp for like a couple homeless people, and they've just dragged some couches in there, and they've set up tents. And when they were incredibly hospitable to us when we visited, and were like, oh yeah, like let me show you around, let me show you my home, and stuff like that. But I mean, like I said, this was a pretty busy area, so it's the kind of thing that most people would walk past. Like, so many people walk past every day, but would never encounter these people.
We then went out to these different places, just corners of streets. There's commotion. You know, society doesn't stop to look at them, these people, and we did. And it was hard for me because my Spanish is still growing, but being able to lean on our Spanish speakers, but Craig's friendships, to be honest. He would go up to them, give them a hug, and then once they realized that we were also friends, they heard what we were saying, and they just kept on saying, yes, we'll go to Mass with you. Of course, of course, of course, we'll see you. And Craig just kept on reiterating, this time, this place, trust us. And a couple said, you're never going to get in. They're never going to let us in.
We would go up to the homeless people and anyone, just like invite them to come to Mass with us. And they didn't believe that they could, because they were like, we've tried to before, and they don't let us in. They don't want us there.
Y vocéis lo que el Señor, nuestro Dios, reprueba. Palabra de Dios.
Sálvanos, Señor, y perdona nuestros pecados. Sálvanos, Señor.
I work with the homeless outside the gates of the Basilica of Guadalupe. There's 250 people that have came just praying for a miracle, and some of them can't walk, some of them are in the last days of their lives. Many have addiction issues. We decided to start having a Mass for those people at the Basilica. I became friends with the rector of the Basilica, Antigua. He just thought it'd be amazing if we could get those people past the gates and into the Basilica to have the Mass. Well, the problem is the guards work for another organization, and so communicating with them is very difficult, and so they don't ever want to let the homeless people come in because they're afraid that people are going to get robbed and they're going to panhandle, something like that, so they just have a policy, homeless people can't come into the Basilica of Guadalupe. And that's where they need to be because they need healing. And so we tried having a Mass and bringing the homeless in. It was pretty much a disaster. The first one actually was cool, but after that they kind of caught on to what we were doing, the guards, and then they just wouldn't let us come in. So when SMU came down in October, I had this really great idea that we would gather all the homeless outside the gates, and then we would just all put our arms around them and just treat them like brothers in Christ, which they are. And then we would walk them in, only like someone would kind of distract the guards by asking a question or something like that. So we got everybody together, we got all the homeless ready to go in, and we went up to distract the guards, and nobody was there. The guards just disappeared, and we just went right in and had the Mass. It was crazy awesome. We carried people in. It was unbelievably awesome.
And I'm so convinced that it's the same Christ that we received that morning, that we saw at Holy Hour, that we also encountered on the streets. And I'm meant to believe this because one particular instance that really brought me to tears was when I saw one of our students carry a homeless person on his back.
It was so beautiful because we were sitting there with all of the people that we had brought in who were total strangers to us and only spoke Spanish, and we were all sitting there celebrating Mass together, and that was so cool. One of the moments that I remember was the person next to me when we were praying the Our Father. He had the tightest, strongest grip on my hand, and it was so cool because we were just praying so intently, and the community was so strong, even with these people that we had never even met before, and it really kind of confirmed or emphasized like the universal Catholic Church, that even though we were from different places and weren't speaking the same language, we were still able to participate and celebrate Mass together.
And just kneeling with them like at Mass and celebrating Mass with them. I at one point looked over and I was like, there's no difference between me and this man who is homeless sitting next to me. We both need Jesus equally. And Our Lady, this is what she wants. She wants all of us, poor, rich, whatever.
That was the chapel of the burial of Juan Diego.
So during the Mass, there was just so much joy. You know, Catholicism is so deeply rooted in Mexico, but these people hadn't been able to receive the Eucharist and the sacraments, and we take that for granted. And they were just so excited and praying, and people were so excited and just hugging Father Arthur and hugging each other and encouraging and helping each other for the people who couldn't walk really well, just to receive Jesus in the sacraments.
I can't even begin to explain the joy I had in Mexico, being able to celebrate the sacraments with so many people. First of all, as a priest, you are limited in what you can do in terms of finance or changing people's life in politics or whatever. But the joy of a priest is being able to celebrate and bring Christ to people. The most profound need of every soul is that desire to be close to their Lord. And so in the sacrament of the Holy Eucharist, and in bringing the sacraments to those who have not received Him in such a long time, you can physically see their desire being quenched. You see their thirst being satiated. But more so, you know that their spiritual life is on fire because they just received the Lord of their lives, and just the biggest desire has been met.
Afterwards, we all stayed together and left together and went to eat tamales that Sandra had made. And so everyone was just hanging out and eating and enjoying each other's company, and we had kind of started to make friends at that time.
But regardless of that, giving that person the time of day and saying, even though it's hard to understand you, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm going to look you in the eyes, and I'm going to let you know that you're loved, even though I don't speak Spanish. All I have to give you is a tamale and my attention and my love. And it was so cool to get to see our whole group doing that day.
She ended up, as we were walking out, she ended up accidentally wetting herself. And the first thing that came to my mind was, I want to get her a new pair of pants. Because if it was anyone else in the world, that's what you would do. If it was my mom, I would want to get her a new pair of pants. If it was my sister, the exact same thing. And so just treating Raquel as I would want anyone who is close and dear to my heart to be treated. Cody and COLLIN ended up just like running across the street and getting her a pair of almost identical pants. She was wearing pink sweatpants, and then they come back with a pair of pink sweatpants. And that was just like really great, just because it wasn't trying to shake up her whole worldview and give her a makeover or anything like that. It was just giving her a replacement. And we sat there and we helped her get changed and get a different pair of socks on and just get the new pair of pants on. And it was very raw, and it was incredibly vulnerable because she trusted us in one of her most vulnerable states to take care of her. And that, yeah, that was just one of the most incredibly spiritual experiences of my life, is just what you did to the least of these, you did to me.
So leaving the homeless people that we just helped bring into Mass was a really sad experience. I really didn't think that we would make great friends with them, but we really like kind of got to know all of them during that like small period of time. It was really sad to leave them because we knew that we were leaving them another night on the streets, and you know, we had been in their lives for a couple of hours and we had served them, but we really couldn't, you know, change their life situation. We couldn't save them. We couldn't be their saviors. All we could do is bring them before Jesus and get them that spiritual healing that they needed that day. And leaving them kind of brought up a lot of thoughts of like, you know, what is our true mission, you know, in life? And watching them was like watching Christ on the way up to Calvary, because we can't stop Christ from his going up to Calvary and dying on the cross. We can't stop him from his death. We can't rescue him from it. All we can do is be like Mary, you know, comforting him on the way up there, you know. We can't stop it. And so watching them, leaving them, is like, all we were able to do that day was comfort Christ on the way to his death, because these people were Christ.
So most of the women who end up at the shelter are living on the street, and they live on the street for a long period of time, most of their lives, and then they reach a point where they're either too old or just incapacitated. They're unable to continue living on the street. And so then they end up in this shelter. And what's really sad is a lot of them will tell you that it's worse living in the shelter than on the street. But they don't really have a choice, because they can't live on the street anymore because of their age, or just, you know, whatever condition they're in.
I met Maria, and she called me over. I had lotion, and so I just started putting lotion in her hands, just kind of like massaging it into her hands. And then she kind of motioned towards her feet. I started putting lotion on her feet, and they were very cold and blackened, almost as if they had literally died. And so as I was kind of massaging her feet, there was dirt and like maggots in her soles, in the soles, the palms of her feet. But it was incredible. I didn't even care, because I was holding her feet in my hands, and I looked up into her eyes, and I saw Jesus. And I saw Jesus, this man that I love. I saw him in Maria's eyes.
Jesus identifies with the poor, those who are hungry, those who are sick, those without homes. is as if to say that he himself lives in them and they live in him. That when you feed a hungry person, you are feeding Christ. And when you feed Christ, you are feeding a hungry person.
Getting to speak to people's dignity, even if it's just a brief moment, is one of the most powerful things that we can do.
I feel like I encounter Christ because, especially with the homeless and the needy, that you see how much compassion that they have, even though they have nothing, that they can find happiness in being able to have community, have people.
Yes, they're suffering, and yes, they deserve like a roof over their head and food in their stomachs and just to be loved by people. I was really moved with just seeing how much they love each other and care for each other and don't need like the physical things in life to find joy.
They find hope in being treated like the people that they are, being treated like human beings with dignity, human beings who are loved by God.
Yeah, and she was just so excited, and she would talk to us. She was like, you know, like, I know you guys are here for a short time, but like, we're gonna be together in heaven. And I was like, yeah, like, we're gonna be together in heaven.
There was moments of like joy. Like, I remember dancing with a lot of the women. They just wanted to like have fun and dance. And so music was playing and we were like salsaing and just having fun. And they were just so joyful too.
¡Dos manos!